The room was quiet, but heavy. A large glass office sat at the top floor of a tall building. Outside, the city moved fast. Inside, time felt slow. At the center of the room sat a famous polyglot. People around the world knew his name. They called him the man of 1,000 languages. Books were everywhere. Old books, rare books, languages from dead civilizations. Several scholars sat in front of him. All of them looked nervous. On the table was a single paper. Old, yellow, written in strange symbols. The polyglot leaned back in his chair and smiled. "This language," he said calmly, "is one of the rarest in the world." He tapped the paper. Only a few people have ever understood it. One by one, the scholars tried. They read the symbols. They guessed the meaning. Every answer was wrong. Some shook their heads. Some stayed silent. One man sighed in defeat. The polyglot laughed softly. "Even experts fail," he said. His voice was smooth, confident, almost proud. Near the door, a woman cleaned the floor. She wore a simple uniform. Her hands moved quietly. She was the maid. Beside her stood her daughter, a young black girl, around 11 years old. She held her school bag close. She watched everything. She said nothing. No one noticed them. The polyglot stood up and walked around the table. He enjoyed moments like this, moments where everyone looked small, and he looked great. "This language defeated universities," he said loudly. "Professors, researchers, even me at first." People nodded. Then his eyes moved toward the corner of the room. He saw the girl. She stood still. Her eyes were calm, focused. The polyglot smiled again. But this smile was different. A joking smile. He pointed at her. "Well," he said with a light laugh, "since no one here can do it." The room turned silent. He looked directly at the girl. "Can you translate this?" A few people chuckled. Some looked uncomfortable. The maid froze. Her heart dropped. She whispered softly, "I'm sorry, sir. She's just a child." The polyglot waved his hand. "I'm only joking," he said. "Relax." The girl looked at her mother, then back at the paper. She did not laugh. She did not smile. She simply asked, "May I see it?" The room went still. The polyglot raised an eyebrow. "You want to see it?" he asked. "Yes," the girl replied quietly. "Just to read." Someone whispered, "This is embarrassing." The maid shook her head slightly. She felt ashamed, scared. The polyglot paused. For a moment, he felt amused. He walked to the table and picked up the paper. "All right," he said. "Let the little genius try." He placed the paper in front of the girl. The girl stepped forward. Her hands did not shake. She looked at the symbols. Her eyes moved slowly, left to right, line by line. Seconds passed, then a minute. No one spoke. The polyglot crossed his arms. He waited for laughter, for silence, for failure. But the girl kept reading. Her face changed. Not confused, not scared, focused. She looked up. "May I speak?" she asked. The polyglot nodded. "Go on," he said, smiling. The girl took a breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but clear. "This text is not a story," she said. "It is a warning." The smile on the polyglot's face froze. She continued. "It talks about a king and a broken promise." Someone gasped quietly. The polyglot felt something strange, a feeling he did not like. Doubt. The girl stopped. She looked at the paper again. "I can continue," she said. The room was completely silent now. No laughs, no jokes, only shock. The polyglot stared at her. For the first time in years, he did not know what to say, and he had no idea that this moment was about to change everything. The room stayed silent. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. The famous polyglot stood still, staring at the girl. His smile was gone now. Only surprise remained. He cleared his throat. "You said this text is a warning," he said. His voice was calm but tight. "Explain." The girl nodded slowly. She looked back at the paper. Her finger traced one symbol, then another. "This symbol means oath," she said, "but not a normal promise." She paused. "It means a promise made before death." A scholar shifted in his chair. The girl continued. "The next line talks about a ruler," she said. "A king who broke his word." She lifted her eyes. "And when a king breaks his word, his land breaks with him." The air felt heavy. One man whispered, "That interpretation is very accurate." The polyglot's jaw tightened. He stepped closer. You are reading too freely, he said. This language is very strict. The girl shook her head gently. No, she replied. It looks strict, but it is poetic. She turned the paper slightly. These marks here, she said, are not commands. They are regrets. A pen fell from someone's hand. The polyglot grabbed another paper from the table. All right, he said sharply. Translate this line. He pointed to a section covered in dark ink. Many scholars had failed there. The girl looked at it. She did not answer quickly. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she spoke. This part is damaged, she said, but the meaning is still clear. The polyglot raised his voice. Ow, she answered softly. Because the writer repeats his pain, she said. When words disappear, emotion stays. Silence. And she read out loud. We lost the sun, not because it left us, but because we turned away. A woman covered her mouth. That is exactly what old notes suggest. A historian whispered. The polyglot stepped back. He laughed once. Short. Forced. Interesting guess, he said. But guesses are not facts. The girl looked at him. It is not a guess, she said. My grandmother taught me this language. The room stirred. Your grandmother? Someone asked. The girl nodded. She grew up near the mountains, she said, where this language was spoken long ago. The maid froze. She had never told anyone this story. The polyglot frowned. That community disappeared, he said. There are no native speakers left. The girl met his eyes. Some voices stay alive, she replied, even when the world forgets them. The polyglot felt uncomfortable. He handed her one last page. This, he said, is the hardest section. He leaned forward. If you could translate this, I will listen. The girl studied it carefully. Longer this time. Her breathing stayed calm. Then she spoke again. This part is not meant to be read aloud, she said. It was written to be felt. She closed her eyes. It is a confession, she said, from a king to his child. Her voice softened. He says he chose power over truth. And now the land is dying. The polyglot's face went pale, because that translation matched his private notes. Notes he never shared. A scholar stood up slowly. That meaning has never been published, he said. The room buzzed. Phones came out. Whispers grew louder. The maid stepped forward. She learned languages for fun, she said quietly. At home. The polyglot raised his hand. Enough, he said. The room went quiet again. He looked at the girl. Not with pride, not with laughter, but with fear. For the first time, he felt small. You didn't memorize this, he said. You understand it. The girl nodded. Yes, she replied. The polyglot turned away. His perfect image cracked. And everyone in that room knew this was no ordinary child. And the real test was only beginning. The room was no longer calm. Whispers filled the air. Phone stayed raised. Eyes stayed locked on the girl. The famous polyglot felt it. Control was slipping. He straightened his jacket, lifted his chin, tried to regain authority. This is becoming a show, he said firmly. And I don't like shows I don't control. The scholars slowly sat back down. Silence returned, but it was sharp now. The girl stood quietly near the table. Her hands were still, her face calm. The polyglot walked toward a large bookshelf. He pulled out a thick, dusty book. This, he said, holding it up, is not a game. He slammed the book on the table. This text is older than any we've seen today. No stories. No poetry. Only structure. He opened the book to a marked page. This section, he said, has failed every student I've tested. He looked directly at the girl. Translate it. The room went cold. The maid took a small step forward. Sir, she said softly, please, she is just a child. The polyglot did not look at her. If she is so gifted, he replied, then she should prove it. The girl looked at her mother. Then she turned back to the page. She did not rush. She read slowly. The symbols were tight, sharp, unforgiving. Minutes passed. The polyglot crossed his arms. Some people smiled. She's stuck, someone whispered. The polyglot leaned closer. Take your time, he said lightly. No pressure. The girl lifted her head. This language is not kind, she said. It was made to hide truth. The polyglot blinked. She continued. It was used by leaders, she said, to confuse the weak. She pointed to a symbol. This mark does not mean law, she said. It means control. The polyglot's face tightened. That is incorrect, he said quickly. That mark always means law. The girl shook her head. Only when spoken by rulers, she replied. When written by the people, it means fear. The room murmured. The polyglot raised his voice. You are changing meanings to sound clever, he said. The girl stayed calm. No, she replied. I am reading who wrote it. She took a breath. This text was written by soldiers, she said, not scholars. Silence slammed into the room. The polyglot laughed again. Louder this time. Enough, he said. You're guessing. He turned to the scholars. Am I right? He asked. No one answered. He slammed his hand on the table. Someone speak. A man slowly raised his hand. She may be right, he said. Some notes suggest different meanings based on class. The polyglot stared at him. The girl kept reading. This sentence, she said, is not a command. It is a cry. Her voice softened. It says, we obeyed, but we were never heard. The maid covered her mouth. The polyglot stepped back. You learned this from books, he said. Tell the truth. The girl met his eyes. I learned it from voices, she said. Stories. Songs. The polyglot shook his head. This is impossible. He grabbed another document. Fine, he said sharply. Last test. He held up a small, torn page. This fragment, he said, has no known translation. He placed it in front of her. If you fail, he added, this ends. The girl studied the fragment. Longer than before. Her eyes softened. This was written by a mother, she said. The polyglot scoffed. There is no way to know that. The girl pointed to the spacing. The writer pauses here, she said. Not for grammar. For pain. She read quietly. If you survive, remember who you are. The room went silent again. A woman wiped her eyes. The polyglot felt something break inside him. This was no trick. No guessing. This girl was reading hearts. He looked around the room. Everyone was watching her now. Not him. For the first time in his life. His words held no power. And he knew his attempt to humiliate her had only exposed himself. And the world was watching. The silence stayed longer this time. No one rushed to speak. No one laughed. No one doubted. The girl stood quietly beside the table. The torn page rested in front of her. Her words still hung in the air. The famous polyglot looked around the room. Every face was changed. Some looked shocked. Some looked thoughtful. Some looked ashamed. He cleared his throat. This is getting out of hand, he said. We need facts. From the back of the room, an older man stood up. He moved slowly, carefully. He was a historian, a respected one. I have studied this language for 40 years, he said. And I want to say something. The room turned toward him. I have never heard anyone translate it like that, he continued. Not from books. Not from notes. He looked at the girl. You did not translate symbols, he said. You translated intention. The girl nodded politely. Another expert stood. I want to confirm something, she said. This fragment. She pointed to the torn page. The spacing she mentioned is real, she said. It suggests emotion, not structure. The polyglot's face tightened. This is interpretation, he argued, not language. The historian shook his head. No, he said. It is language at its deepest level. A quiet murmur spread across the room. The polyglot raised his voice. She's a child, he said. She cannot know more than decades of research. The historian answered calmly. Knowledge and understanding are not the same. The room went silent again. The polyglot felt heat rise in his chest. He turned to the girl. Where did your grandmother learn this? He asked. The girl paused. She was taught by her grandmother, she said. And she taught me. The maid stepped forward. My mother came from a forgotten village, she said softly. They passed stories by voice, not books. The historian's eyes widened. That explains everything, he said. The polyglot frowned. Explain what? He snapped. The historian took a breath. This language had two forms, he said. One for rulers. One for the people. He pointed to the text. Our studies focus on the ruler's version, he said. But she reads the people's voice. A scholar whispered. That version was never written down. The girl spoke again. It was sung, she said. Before it was written. The room felt heavy with realization. The polyglot stepped back. No, he said quietly. This cannot be true. The historian looked at him. It is, he said. And this child may be the last living bridge to that world. Phones were now openly recording. The polyglot noticed. For years, he controlled knowledge, controlled respect. Now, he was losing it. The historian turned to the girl. Can you tell us what this last line means? He asked gently. The girl looked at the paper. This line, she said, was written after the land fell. Her voice softened. It says, if power forgets the people will remember themselves. The room went still. Someone exhaled slowly. The polyglot felt something sink inside him. This translation matched something he once felt, but never understood. A young scholar spoke. She didn't just learn this language, he said. She lived it. The polyglot looked at the girl. For the first time, not as a joke, not as a test, but as a threat, and as a truth. He realized something painful. Everything he built was based on control. Her gift was based on connection. The maid placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. The girl stood tall now. The polyglot turned away from the table. He felt the room no longer belonged to him. And deep inside, he knew, no matter what he did next, this truth could no longer be hidden. The room felt different now. Heavy, uncomfortable. The famous polyglot stood near the window. His back faced the crowd. For years, this room had obeyed him. Now it watched him. He turned around slowly. This meeting is over, he said. His voice sounded firm but thin. No one moved. The historian stepped forward. With respect, he said, I believe this moment is just beginning. The polyglot clenched his jaw. We invited experts, he replied. Not children. The girl stood still. She said nothing. A young scholar raised his hand. There is something we need to address, he said. He looked nervous. The polyglot narrowed his eyes. Speak. The scholar swallowed. I reviewed your early translations, he said. From 10 years ago. The room leaned in, and I compared them to older field notes. The polyglot laughed sharply. My work is public, he said. Nothing new there. The scholar hesitated. Some of your translations, he continued, match these notes exactly. The polyglot's smile faded. Those notes were never published, the scholar added. Silence struck the room. The polyglot's voice hardened. Are you accusing me of something? The historian spoke calmly. No, he said. We are asking questions. The scholar continued. These notes belong to local elders, he said. They were oral translations. The polyglot stepped forward. That is normal research, he said quickly. The girl finally spoke. May I say something? She asked. All eyes turned to her. She looked at the scholar. Those notes, she said, were written by my grandmother. The maid gasped softly. The room froze. The polyglot stared at the girl. That is impossible, he said. The girl met his eyes. She traveled, she said. She shared stories. She trusted scholars. The historian's face changed. I remember those notes, he said slowly. They were given freely. The girl nodded. She believed language belongs to everyone, she said. Not to one name. The polyglot's hands trembled slightly. That does not prove anything, he said. The girl walked closer to the table. She pointed to a document. This sentence, she said. You translated it as Law of Kings. She paused. My grandmother translated it as Burden of Rulers. The historian checked his copy. That is true, he said quietly. The polyglot looked around. People were whispering now. Phones recorded openly. The scholar spoke again. You did not steal, he said carefully, but you simplified. The polyglot's face flushed. You removed emotion, the scholar continued. You removed pain. You made it sound clean. The girl spoke softly. You took the people out of it. The words hit hard. The polyglot's voice rose. I made it understandable, he shouted. For the world. The historian replied gently. And in doing so, he said, you erased their voice. The room stayed silent. The polyglot looked at the girl. You are too young to understand what I built, he said. The girl answered calmly. My grandmother said, she replied, when knowledge forgets its source, it becomes empty. The polyglot's shoulders dropped. This was no attack. It was truth. He sat down slowly. For the first time, he looked tired. The room waited. Finally, he spoke. I learned these languages fast, he said. Too fast. I studied books, he continued. But I feared silence. He looked at the girl. You listened, he said quietly. The girl did not smile. She did not celebrate. She only nodded. The historian stepped forward. This is not a trial, he said. It is a moment of choice. The polyglot closed his eyes. His title, his pride, his image, all fragile now. And everyone knew, once a mask falls, it can never be worn the same way again. The room felt quieter than ever before. Not because no one was there, but because everyone was waiting. The famous polyglot sat in his chair. His hands rested on the table. Still, the girl stood across from him, calm, unshaken. For the first time in his life, he did not speak first. The historian broke the silence. This knowledge does not belong to one person, he said. It belongs to history. The polyglot nodded slowly. I know, he said. His voice sounded older now. Tired. He looked at the girl. When I was young, he said, I wanted to understand the world. He paused. Then people started praising me, he continued. And I stopped listening. No one interrupted him. I collected languages, he said, but I forgot the people inside them. The girl listened quietly. The polyglot stood up. He walked to the bookshelf. He pulled out a thin folder. This, he said, is my private work. He placed it on the table. These notes were never shared, he said. Not with universities. Not with media. The historian raised an eyebrow. You want us to review them? He asked. The polyglot nodded. Yes, he said. Open them. The scholars exchanged looks. The historian opened the folder. His eyes widened. These translations, he said slowly, they are unfinished. The polyglot nodded. Because I did not fully understand them, he admitted. The room held its breath. He turned to the girl. You do, he said. The girl lowered her eyes. The polyglot took a deep breath. I owe you something, he said. He turned to the maid. And I owe you an apology. The maid froze. I judged without knowing, he said. I saw uniforms, not people. He bowed his head slightly. I am sorry. The room felt heavy with emotion. The maid's eyes filled with tears. The girl placed a hand on her mother's arm. The polyglot straightened. I cannot change my past, he said, but I can choose my next step. He looked at the historian. I want this language recorded correctly, he said, with its emotion, its pain. The historian nodded. That requires trust, he said. The polyglot turned back to the girl. I would like you to help, he said. The room gasped softly. He continued. Not as a test subject, he said. Not as a symbol, but as a teacher. The girl looked surprised. Me? She asked. Yes, he replied. You see what I missed? The girl thought for a moment. My grandmother said, she said slowly, knowledge must be shared with respect. The polyglot nodded. I agree. He reached into his pocket. He placed a small card on the table. This is a full scholarship, he said. Education, travel, choice. The room watched closely. The girl did not rush. She looked at her mother, then back at the polyglot. I will help, she said, but not alone. The polyglot smiled gently. Of course, he said. The historian stepped forward. This is how history should be saved, he said. The polyglot exhaled. A weight lifted. For the first time, he did not feel like the smartest person in the room. And that felt right. The girl returned to her mother's side. The maid squeezed her hand. The polyglot looked around. This room was built on ego, he said. Today it will be built on truth. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was hopeful. And everyone knew the ending was near. But the lesson was just beginning. Months had passed. The world had changed. A large hall was filled with people from many countries. Scholars, students, journalists. Cameras waited. On the stage stood a young black girl. She was calm, confident. She held a small notebook in her hands. The same girl who once stood quietly beside her mother's cleaning cart. Now, the world was listening. The famous polyglot sat in the audience. Not at the front, but among others. Watching, listening. The girl stepped forward. This language, she said softly, was never meant to be owned. Her voice echoed gently. It was meant to be carried. The screen behind her showed old symbols. The same symbols that once confused experts. She pointed to them. These words were spoken before they were written, she said. They were sung before they were studied. The audience stayed silent. The girl continued. My grandmother taught me this language, she said. She did not use books. She used stories. She paused. She said knowledge dies when pride speaks louder than truth. Many people nodded. The historian sat near the stage. He smiled. The polyglot lowered his eyes. The girl looked around the hall. "When I was first asked to translate," she said, "I was not angry. I was curious." Some people smiled softly. "I was curious why my voice was treated like a joke." The room felt heavy. "But today," she continued, "I am not here to prove anything. I'm here to remind." She took a breath. "Great minds do not always wear suits. They do not always stand at the front." The audience listened closely. "Sometimes," she said, "they stand quietly, waiting to be seen." Applause filled the room. Slow at first, then strong. The polyglot stood. He clapped, not loudly, but sincerely. The girl smiled slightly. After the speech, people gathered around her. Reporters asked questions. "How did you learn so much?" one asked. She answered simply, "I listened." Another asked, "Do you think intelligence is judged unfairly?" She nodded. "Too often," she said. Later that day, the polyglot walked beside her. "You did not embarrass me," he said quietly. "You taught me." The girl looked up. "My grandmother said," she replied, "teaching is kindness." The polyglot smiled. Together, they walked past a display. It showed the language written clearly. Both forms, the ruler's words, and the people's voice. Side by side, the maid stood nearby, watching her daughter, tears in her eyes, not of pain, but pride. The polyglot stopped. "This language will be taught differently now," he said. "With its heart." The girl nodded. "That is all it ever wanted," she replied. The camera pulled back. The hall filled with voices. Different accents. Different faces. One shared truth. A narrator's voice closed the story. They laughed at her because they did not know. They doubted her because they could not see. But wisdom does not ask permission, and genius does not wear a label. Never judge a mind by position. Never judge a soul by silence. Because the quietest voice may carry the deepest truth. The screen faded to black.